Call the meeting to order. Let's start with our pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. City bill. There, I went. 4-1 pending.
That's a good sign,
All right, good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Just a couple of quick things. We had video difficulties last meeting, so we have replaced the computer running that. And we've been trying to tweak the audio to get a little bit better recording. So just a reminder to speak into the mics and not to cover the area mics, and hopefully they will continue to pick us up. If we get feedback, I'll adjust the volume, but we should still be recording. So, and with that, the agenda you have has the addition of one item on the consent agenda with a gambling permit for the Sheldon Valley Sportsmen Association. So that's on there. And we will table item 5, the Stantec contract. They're still, Amelia's still working some things out with that. So those are the changes I have to the agenda. And with minutes approval, we'd also like, you've also received a copy of the Board of Adjustment minutes, and we need to put approval of those
I did
on the record.
confirm with Cindy that we don't actually need board approval for that.
Okay.
They'll keep copies on file now.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so we can skip
because
that
I
then.
thought it needed to be so.
Okay.
With that, I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
So
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Approving the minutes for our June 26th board meeting and our July 2nd workshop session.
Move to approve.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? At this time, we'll open it to public comment. If anybody would like to address the board, state your name and township.
Brian Van Gorp, Yucatan Township. I understand as a Board of Adjustment member that I serve at the pleasure of this board. Apparently, voting in favor of enforcement does not give some of you pleasure. I have been told by some of you that you think I attacked Aaron. That was never my intent. My intent was to spur this board to take positive actions. I have stated publicly on several occasions that I think Aaron is a huge improvement over the past zoning administrator. I believe Aaron is doing his best to straighten out the big mess he inherited. I support him in that work. I spoke with Aaron about this, and he did not feel attacked. I have brought up suggestions to improve the number of zoning problems. These were not complaints about Aaron. They were attempts to get this board to resolve the problems. Number 1, put a time limit on dealing with complaints so there is actual enforcement. Number 2, implement a procedure to avoid violations moving to new property owners, often without them being aware they could be held responsible. This makes accountability difficult and unfair. The Board of Adjustments voted unanimously asking you to act on this issue. I have also discussed with Aaron a way to better handle staff analysis on the variance questions so that the intent of the ordinance can be better fulfilled. Yes, a judge did rule I needed to recuse myself from a particular case, a case in which I voted with the 4-to-1 majority. My vote was also in harmony with the county staff analysis. No one has been able to explain Judge Storino's ruling to me. Several members of this board expressed confusion over the ruling. According to her ruling, the problem was that after all the evidence had been presented and we were ready to vote, I expressed empathy towards the landowner who was the victim of past lack of enforcement, and that I had an opinion on the case. Of course I had an opinion on the case at this point in the hearing. It would have been improper for me not to have had an opinion. We were about to vote. The opinion I expressed was that we needed to enforce the ordinance. Can someone explain to me how that is a problem? All this has nothing to do with frac sand mining issue. That has been resolved. It won't happen. We have saved the county huge problems. We are pleased to be of service. I am not against mining. I am currently waiting for gravel for my driveway. As a veterinarian, I was a leading advocate for using sand for bedding for cows. I have made it clear in several public statements, I am not against mining. If someone can show evidence of my being against mining, please bring it forward. What I have taken a stand on is that mining can be done in compliance with the ordinance, and that the ordinance should be enforced. If you have a problem with that, you are the one with some explaining to do. I am not serving on the Board of Adjustments for fun. I find it difficult, and I struggle regularly with what is the right thing to do in situations where there is no win-win answer. I certainly am not doing it for the money. I am serving out of civic responsibility, an attempt to improve the performance of the Board of Adjustments, which we all know has had serious problems in the past. Several people have offered unsolicited compliments regarding my work on the Board of Adjustments. I have been complimented by 3 of you commissioners, the zoning administrator, the county attorney, and several citizens. Mr. Johnson is the only critic that I am aware of, and he has a history of trying to denigrate my reputation.
Excuse me, I call a
with
point of order
reputation
on this.
with newspaper ads lying about me.
He can point me out.
So I'm wondering if this is really about my performance on the Board of Adjustment, or is this a personal vendetta? Thank you. Any questions?
Anybody else wish to address the board?
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Bruce Kimiko from Caledonia.
Morning.
Family is important. Mr. Eric Johnson has a brother who owns a non-conforming rock quarry on Paradise Road above Houston. Currently, there's a 1-year-old formal complaint against its renewed operation from a protracted multi-year dormancy. The Kruko Company's ruling by Judge Storino this June is crucial to setting up a precedent on the interpretation and enforcement of the mining zoning ordinance regarding non-conforming quarries. There is a direct connection between the non-conforming mines of Kruko and Johnson. The county is placing the 1-year-old complaint against Johnson's 2x4 quarry on Paradise Road on the back burner until such time as the disputing parties in the Kruko case either accept the revote by the Board of Adjustment on the remand or continue the appeal process to a resolution. Mr. Johnson's familial connection to the issue of his brother's compliance or avoidance to the mining ordinance is conflicting and would give the impression of partiality and favoritism. He needs to recuse himself from any aspect of non-conforming mine determinations or the personnel involved by the zoning department and the Board of Adjustment until such time that the complaint against the 2x4 quarry is finally settled. If Mr. Johnson refuses to recuse himself, it is obviously the option of the remaining board members to make it so. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to address the board?
Can I respond to this?
Actually, you don't need to. They have a right to bring it
I've
up,
been-
even though.
I've been accused by two people here of actions that is not true. And first of all, they've just been discussing a case that is going to be coming before the Board of Adjustment again. So they
That's
have
true.
already violated.
We are not supposed to discuss it before.
Exactly. We are not supposed to discuss a future case.
And
So right
actually-
away, we've already got code of ethics violations. And Mr. Van Gorp is not supposed to be involved in the next case, the remand hearing.
What I did was agree to recuse myself.
Excuse me. So I think
Yeah.
this, what happened just here now is wrong. They think I'm supposed to recuse myself for everything, but that's okay that they don't have to recuse themselves for anything. So I feel it's unfair, and I'm disappointed that it wasn't pointed out by other commissioners. That's all.
Okay. I think we'll move ahead with our 9:30 appointment. Kurt Wayne.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just move the mouse there. Thank you. Thank you.
I'll test the mic. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, can everybody,
Okay, testing. Okay. it is. I want to thank the commissioners for allowing MnDOT to be here today to present sort of what is becoming sort of an annual presentation of an update about our construction program, our construction plans for a 10-year period. My name is Kurt Wayne. I'm the principal planner with MnDOT District 6 in Rochester office.
My name is Cindy Morgan. I am the Public Engagement Coordinator for District 6.
We are here today to give you a little more background about this year's, what we call our capital highway investment plan, or about a
Excuse me,
10-year
sir.
plan. Oh, yeah.
I hear that your voice is not getting picked up by the mic,
Oh.
so I'm asking if people in the back are able to hear him.
I'll try
And
again.
I get no's.
Okay,
So
I will try again. Testing 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. Hello.
just go ahead
Okay.
with the presentation,
Sure.
but just be aware. You see how close I am to the mic?
Okay.
About 3 inches. Okay, just pull it
Give it a
toward
good
you.
lean. There we go.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
You can also pull it forward if you need to.
Yes, that's true. A little bit more. A little bit more. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, we wanted to give a presentation today. Should take maybe just about 10 minutes of me talking, and then some time for questions for you as well. Before we get into the presentation, I also wanted to point out each of you should have a packet now that's got information on the presentation. You'll see on the right-hand side there are also maps. They're blown up from the maps. They're the same as the maps in the presentation. They just might be a little bit easier for you to kind of read and look at. I also want to point out there is a little bit of additional information in the packet too about this year's the 2019 construction program for MnDOT roads in southeast Minnesota, as well as what we call kind of one-pagers of information. And that is, we have information about our major projects coming up in the next few years, information for you about reduced conflict intersections, what they are, why MnDOT builds them, and then a little more information about a study we're doing about advancing transportation equity. So that is for you to keep, that is for you to read. You can reference it during the presentation too if you see fit, but without any more on that, I think I will get started on the presentation here. So, okay, that's scrolling. Today we want to focus in on just a few topics here. So I wanted to talk about our new funding projections for the STIP and CHIP. The STIP and CHIP are acronyms, but essentially the STIP stands for what's our next 4 years of programmed projects, and the CHIP references what is the next years 5 to 10 out, up to 10 years of our sort of plan of projects. So I want to talk about those future MnDOT projects. I'll give a little bit more information about construction projects going on currently this year, as well as a little bit of information for you guys about how you and your constituents can stay informed. So, I am sharing, the next couple slides are bar graphs. They're not that exciting, but they're important. It's about some of the funding targets that we have to work with within our MnDOT district. We're one of approximately 8 districts in the state of Minnesota, and we have to kind of balance different funding targets. So I wanted to point out, and if you're having trouble reading, I'm sorry, on the screen, there is the paper handout. It might be a little bit easier to read in the paper handout too. So, what I will indicate on this one is this is a graph of sort of our targets for investment that are set by our central office versus how we as a district actually plan our investment. And we try to hit our targets as close as possible. So the targets that we have are the blue bars, and you'll see that the green bars that nearly match them is how District 6 is responding this year with revenues that we see coming in over the next 10 years. So, as I want to point out, the only real major difference is we believe as a district that over the next 10 years we can save a significant amount in project delivery. That's sort of the nuts and bolts of turning a project from an idea to construction, and be able to put that back into the rest of the categories of our construction program. So, with that, the next bar kind of looks at our projections for revenues as a district. This graph indicates some of our out years, so we're looking at actually 2024 through 2029. The two things to note here is that the blue bars that vary on top, that is funding that we receive to put towards the national highway system, which would be the interstate highways and the U.S. highways. And that fluctuates a little bit between year and year because sometimes there are larger projects in other districts that need more of the state funds for that. The green bars stay pretty steady throughout the years. They have a slight increase to them in each year, as you can see in the projections, but that's sort of the rest of the funds, the discretionary funds. We use it towards the trunk highways, so like a lot of state highways. But we have a little bit more discretion about how we do that. And so as you'll see, and as you'll see in the maps later on in the presentation, we sort of turn that funding into how do we piece together what the next 10 years of construction projects should look like, maintenance, making sure that our highways are kept in the best possible condition. So, I have a red dotted line on this graph too. That indicates where we thought the revenues for those years would be at this time last year. And as you can see, it's nearly identical, but the revenues that we project have come down just a little bit, maybe about 1 to 2%. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the revenues and why the funding change we're looking at right now. So MnDOT bases its long-range planning of projects, so that's kind of our 10-year plan, on what we have as a 20-year revenue forecast from a planning document called MnSHIP. So there's a lot of thinking that goes into the 20-year revenue forecast, but again, at the end of the day, it's just our best guess. So we have to be as conservative as we can while still thinking in terms of what do we think the revenues will still be in 10 years' time or plus. And potentially how many vehicle miles traveled and other factors like that we'll be seeing in about 10 years' time. And so we do our best to kind of make a forecast and then project that out as revenues to the districts across the state. So each year we have to revise the forecast for the next 4 years based on all these variables. And for this year's forecast, there was a particularly significant revision to the funding anticipated in years 2022 and 2023, so just a few years from now. And that funding revision was, for our district, it was a decrease in revenues. So that is sort of the situation we're looking at here in terms of MnDOT funding the state highway systems. It's not a significant difference, but it's enough, as you'll see, that it made us have to kind of shift a little bit what projects were in what years. So with that, again, to compensate, MnDOT as an agency had to move some projects back from our STIP, that's the next 4 years of planned projects, into the CHIP, which is farther back and farther away in time. And we had to adjust projects in the CHIP to balance the program. So this obviously is just sort of an example slide here. This isn't like we don't call things program project A, B, C, D. But as an example here, just as a reminder, let's say we have less revenue now than we see in fiscal year 22. That means one project we thought we would do then would be bumped back to 23. When we bump that back, it may bump 1 or 2 more projects back from 23 back to 24. And then as you'll see, in some of the planned years where we have more flexibility in terms of when we might do the projects and where the funding would come from, some of the funding years have changed significantly for some projects based on our knowledge this time last year. So that's kind of an example of how we had to shuffle our program just a little bit over the past year or so. So in addition to this, our materials office in Rochester was identifying some new priorities for pavement projects since 2018, given the new information that they've been gathering on pavement condition. They're always, as a department, gathering information about the current pavement condition, trying to project future pavement conditions of the state highways, U.S. highways, interstate highways. And as a result, this year, there's some projects kind of in our farther out years that moved multiple years. And there's actually even some projects that actually bumped ahead, bumped sooner in time. So the grand result of sort of a funding adjustment and a different look at some of our pavements this year is that I think you'll see in the maps this year, if you can compare them to last year's maps, a lot of the projects are still there, they're still planned for there, but the years may have changed, and they may have changed by quite a few years. So with that, I will pause for a second. Are there any questions about that?
One curiosity question, when you talk about the funding, plus or minus that you anticipate, when you put your plans together, do your plans include inflation? I mean, you've got current prices and then like the ones that are 10 years out, do you have a 10-year inflation value plugged in?
The short answer is yes. The longer answer is I don't know the details of that, but I know we do factor in inflation. All right. With that then, I will get into a little more detail about our next 10 years of programmed and planned projects. So these are the maps on your right-hand side. I don't think you'll be able to read this map. I can't from here at least. So I'll also be looking at the paper copies.
One either, right?
I see.
It's in the folder. I feel like I'm
I
taking
think
an
these are
eye
blown
exam.
up enough, the 11 by 17s, that you should be able to see pretty well. But I just want to direct your attention to the first two. So the first two here, I just wanted to maybe skim. I didn't want to read through the whole thing, but I wanted to share this first map. It should be the first one in your folder. Is our construction plans. It is for the next 4 years of projects. The reason we put this on a separate map is these projects are what we call programmed. We've identified where the funding will come from. We have scoped these projects, meaning we know roughly what the project will be, and now we are somewhere within like the design work or the phasing work, approaching the construction work of these projects. But these projects are less likely to change years or change significantly in what they are. And this is the map for southeast Minnesota. The next map that you'll see is the further out years. Those are our CHIP years again. So 2024 through 2029, our long-range plans. The distinction here is that these are our list of planned projects. So we come out with a list that says we think we'll do these projects, but because we don't have the funding identified yet, and we don't know the full scope of the project yet, we just have a good guess at it, these could change. The amount of money we need to use to deliver the projects could change. The year in which we deliver the project could change. So these are a little more in flux, but we still try to plan up to 10 years out to match it with the revenues and the targets we have. Yes?
How many districts does MnDOT have?
There are 8 districts. Yes.
Okay, so the districts, do they compete against one another? I mean, how is it determined that we can fund 6 but we can't fund 3 or vice versa? I mean, is it
That's a good question. Yes, I would say, in terms of is it a competition? Not really. It can feel like it a little bit sometimes because there is a fixed amount of resources that the state can use for the state highway system. So, the second question, how is some of this balance between the districts determined? I can't answer that fully. There are many steps to it. It's complex. There are some formulas that kind of start. Formulas that are based on either vehicle miles traveled, population, centerline miles, the total amount of assets that a district has too. A lot of those factors go into it, but I don't know the details beyond that. There's a lot of also decision-making points too, where directors, high-level directors at the districts, as well as planners and engineers at the state level, kind of negotiate some of these things too. So, short answer is it is complicated. The third map is the one we'll probably look at the most here, I think, and that one is of Houston County. This is our full 10 years of programmed and planned projects within Houston County as of right now. Always the caveat with these maps is these are subject to change for a lot of the reasons I've kind of discussed already today. I think some of the big things to note is, I believe right here in Caledonia, the Highway 44 project actually, I think, moved closer 1 year. I think last year we were thinking we might do 44 to Hoka as a resurfacing project in 25. Now we're actually thinking it might be a 2024 project is more appropriate. So that's one example of a year changing. Another, I think, project of note is potentially in 2024 as well. We project the Highway 16 through the city of Houston is due for a full reconstruction of the road, which would be a significant project. So I think at this time last year we were either not considering that one yet, or we were thinking maybe that would just be like a simple resurfacing, like a mill and overlay type of project. Thinking right now is that would be a full kind of dig it up and put it back down again sort of project. And that came to be because some of our engineers have actually been talking pretty closely with the City of Houston staff about what their needs for their utilities and some of the hydraulics, the curb is like there. So we've been doing some fact finding, and that's actually caused a change in our program right now. So.
Yeah, that's a good idea because there's some issues through Houston on drainage and curb and stuff. So I'm glad that you guys are talking back and forth.
Does that become a shared project then with the city of Houston?
It could. I know with many of our sort of, we call them urban projects. Houston is not necessarily an urban area necessarily, but it's not fully rural. It has needs and sidewalks and other things that are unique to towns and cities. For our urban projects like that, we will sometimes do what's like locally led projects where the city actually takes the lead on the construction project, but with MnDOT sort of guidance and permission and supervision over it, and using MnDOT state funds to do the fix to the trunk highway system. So there's an opportunity there, yes. Yes.
Going through Houston, is it just the drive lanes or all the way up, including the parking?
If it is a reconstruction of the roadway, it should be from curb to curb, or even potentially from far side of sidewalk to far side of sidewalk too. So it just depends on what is needed on a particular block or what is needed there. So
MnDOT is responsible for the ADA access on the corners.
We have a responsibility, yes, in general for ADA and sidewalk. We also have a responsibility, we have a cost participation policy. So if the responsibility you're referring to has to do with costs, that is always negotiated, that is always followed very closely in every project, our own policy, and we always talk with cities and counties about that.
That was recently done in Spring Grove.
Yes. Are there any other questions or comments about the next 10 years of projected projects? And again, I think each year we come and present to you, this map can look a little bit different. But usually as we get closer in time to a project, it sticks better, essentially.
The replacement of the Crystal Creek Bridge, bridge number 5848, what year is that? 2028?
Let me look for you here. The replacement of,
That's what it looks like here.
oh, I see it there. Yes, that is what I'm seeing, yes.
Is there any chance of that getting moved up?
I don't know for sure. I don't know much about that
Okay.
project yet. We'll make a note of that one. Do you notice anything in particular about that bridge versus other
It's
bridges?
a narrow bridge.
It's a narrow bridge, okay. Thank you. Good.
One moment here.
One thing that I usually bring up every year when you come to visit us is that intersection on, what is it, County 3 and Highway 26 in Brownsville.
Oh,
It's
yes,
a
okay.
very difficult intersection to see any oncoming traffic from the right when you're leaving Brownsville. And I've seen where you almost have to get out of the car and look down the road to see if somebody's coming before you pull out where everybody's going 55 miles an hour. Is that ever going to be put on the list, be improved? Oh, Brian has an answer, I think.
Yeah, I can answer that. So I have spoken with our MnDOT state engineer about that. There is a new funding source, kind of used for joint projects similar to highway fixed intersections that have a benefit to both the local system and the MnDOT system. But that is probably a better funding source to go through and make this improvement rather than MnDOT doing their next project and then finding that money funds for cost share. So I am pursuing that. I have not.
Okay.
But that is slowly moving ahead, trying to figure out what year and timing and how what we designed up, whether it's county design or what we're looking at right now, that maybe actually not plans that actually design. So it is moving, it's just not.
I just haven't heard about it since last year when we brought it up.
Tired of asking Janet if something's
Okay.
covered.
I know.
So I want to take the last just few minutes here and just say really quick, you have a map in your packet as well, because that one's hard to read, but we did provide you a little more information this year about where some of the current and rest of the summer construction projects are located, and there's quite a bit happening in MnDOT District 6 this year. That is information for you and your constituents. A major project update for you all. In terms of, I don't know how much you've heard about US 14, the 4-lane expansion corridors of commerce project. That one's moving forward, and construction will technically start this calendar year. So it is a construction project for this year. You probably won't see much if you drive by there even later this year. It's probably a lot of the pre-work, but it will start in earnest, the rest of the work, in 2020. And that construction project should go all the way through the summer of 2022. That is a multi-year project. That is a pretty significant project. That is, it will be a fully new alignment of US 14 from Owatonna to Dodge Center to stay on the south side of the railroad tracks there. So that's going to be the other complication. There's a little bit more to it than just going 2 to 4 lanes there. So, for US 52 between Cannon Falls and Zumbrota, we have a significant project coming up soon. The next couple of years. It's what we call a rural regrade, but for about a dozen or more miles, we'll dig up the whole southbound lanes because the whole base pavement is very old, and it would be better for the life cycle of the road to just completely replace the road. That'll be a significant project, a multi-year project to accomplish. There will be some access management work with that project as well. That project is currently undergoing public outreach and design work, so you can learn more kind of about the design work if you'd like to on our website. The Red Wing Bridge is a project we are currently working on. The schedule got bumped back a little bit because of the recent spring and into summer Mississippi River flooding, but we're getting actually back on track for the schedule. So I was told recently that we're still on schedule, that the new bridge, the project wouldn't be done, but the new bridge would actually be open to regular vehicle traffic by the end of this calendar year. That's still a possibility. So things are moving along with that. Finally, here today, we just want to share with you some ways that you and your constituents can stay further connected with MnDOT about our transportation projects and other topics. When it comes to construction projects, you can learn about future and current construction projects on our website. I think a lot of current construction projects have websites. Only some of our larger future projects have websites currently. Is that correct?
Right, as they get further into, coming into fruition, then we start to build those websites so we can communicate more effectively and have information on those sites. So some, if they are very large projects and really far out, you won't find something for it just yet. But as we go forward with that, then they'll start to pop up.
We also have messaging too about, upcoming public meetings and as well as construction and detour updates that are on Facebook as well as Twitter, kind of short messages that way, kind of easy to digest that way. And then, as always, our 511 website down there at the bottom is very useful for checking road conditions as well as traffic conditions. You can also check out some of the traffic cameras that we have in certain places. Each year we have a few more traffic cameras in our district. You can be able to, essentially good monitoring of conditions of our roadway system through that website.
I have one question.
Yes.
Now this relates more to Fillmore County and of course the western part of Houston County. When we go to Rochester, we tend to prefer going up 52, which takes us through Chatfield. And we think periodically about, I wonder if they're ever going to do anything about bypassing that city. That's a long ways through that town. Any thought of that, or isn't it just totally impractical?
I wouldn't call it totally impractical, but I would say that given what we have for funding for the highway system at a statewide level, it's hard to place a high priority on a bypass of Chatfield at this time. I think that, as far as I know right now, we aren't pursuing a lot of bypasses. They're very costly projects for essentially what the benefit you receive. There would be some benefit, there'd be some travel time saved benefit, but I think a lot of the cost-benefit analyses, I'm kind of said at this point, we have to put most of our funds right now towards the preservation of the system, and so it's not completely impractical, but it's not being planned in any way at this time. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other final
Does
questions?
traffic signal placement go through your office, or is that a different
It would go through our traffic and safety.
traffic and safety?
Yes.
Talk to Brian and
Yes.
work with the county engineer on something.
And I think in Houston County, planning and traffic have been involved in the past about kind of discussions about traffic signals, kind of uses and safety practicality as well. So yes, the first point would be through the traffic office, though. Yes. Well, I thank you all for the time today, and I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
Here's my contact information as well as my boss, Heather Luke. She is the planning director of District 6. Any other questions you might have about our program and construction projects, or if you just need help getting a hold of maybe a different department, you're welcome to contact us.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I like
Thank you.
this yearly update. It's very nice to have some contact.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you.
You're welcome.
Moving on, Shirley Johnson in the Historical Society.
Good morning. You're dealing with the old timers today. Two of our directors had family emergencies today, and one is on the way home from Colorado, and one can't be here, so
That's
you'll have to
okay.
deal with the old guys.
I thought
Happy to have you here,
Yeah, I thought it was Youth Day, actually.
You think you-
Anyway, we've had another good busy year, and first of all, do all of you know Georgia Rosendahl?
I don't know you folks, I'm Georgia Rosendahl.
She's one of our directors, and I'm Shirley Johnson, the president. So we have a lot going on this year. We continue to have so many people researching and coming into the county. We feel we're a real asset to the county for all the people that come from all across the country. We had, I think, people from about 28 states last year, something like that. So anyway, some of the things I want to touch on is we finally got a endowment fund going. We sold the Presbyterian Church in Mance last year, and we were a recipient of estate, and so that started our foundation. And as we receive unexpected things like this, we will put this into the foundation to get the society on a firm financial basis. We've sort of been hand to mouth most of the time, I think, don't you? And so that's where we're standing on that. And we were careful who we sold the church to, and it's we feel it's really going to be good. It's an organization by the name of Mainspring has taken it over and restoring and keeping the church. We didn't want it torn down, so we're very happy with that. We've been busy with the buildings. We put a new roof on the school. We're now working on lots of repairs at the Christian Bungie Junior store in Eitzen. And we are working on our Houston County timeline. We did receive a legacy grant for that of about $7,000, so we're happy with that. Some of the things that are on the horizon is we have to roof the log house and the church, but we were still working on that from last year. So, but we put surface on the basement floor in our new museum, and it is a disaster. So we're considering redoing that. We haven't had anybody look at it yet, but it's a costly thing. But this basement was meant to be more of the museum with the transportation items and the tractors and things in there. We have discontinued our book sale because we found it was taking most of a year to put it together, and it takes so much time from other things. And then we have this Barnyard Friends building that we're getting quotes on. We haven't decided yet how to go about that, so it's just on the horizon. And our main display for the fair this year will be commemorating World War II, the 75th anniversary of D-Day, June 6, 1944, with uniforms and photographs and memorabilia. So it will be quite a big display of World War II things. We wish we could find some World War II veterans, but it's pretty difficult. All I know of is 2 in Houston. I don't know if where others are.
Excuse me, Shirley, would you require that they be from Houston County?
I didn't hear what he said.
Would you require that a veteran be from Houston County if you wanted to have?
I'm not getting it.
Oh.
Would the veterans have to be from Houston County?
The World
Well,
War II veteran?
We sort of would like to honor Houston County
Okay,
World War II.
I thought it was more of a, maybe an informational or ask them question type thing, but you'd rather
Yeah.
just honor the people from
We're
Houston
honoring
County
the-
that we're in?
honoring the
Yeah,
people,
okay.
yeah.
Because
But that-
otherwise, the Freedom Honor Flight probably has a list of those that are still
Last year,
alive.
the last 2 years, we've been doing World War I,
Okay,
and because it was the 100th anniversary of that. We're trying to keep up with what the anniversaries are and things like that.
sure.
And there will be many other displays too. We usually have 1,200 to 1,500 people come through during the fair time, so it really, people seem to enjoy it. So, and we're so looking forward to having our timeline, because that will tell Houston County's history. It's just a long process to try and get it together. So, and we invite you anytime to come and visit. We'd be glad to give you a tour of what we're doing. So, Georgia, you have some?
Well, I deal mostly with research for families, and which is really changed since when I started, because it's on the internet mostly now, and it's really been a challenge to follow along. We use Ancestry.com a lot, and that way it's quite interesting to have to say. So it's and I want to thank you commissioners for all these years that we've come to you, because without you, we wouldn't be where we are today. So, thank you.
I think
My
you do a wonderful
sen-
job there. I've been
My
there many
sentiments
times.
exactly. We appreciate the continued support of all these years, so. If they have any questions, we would entertain them.
To say earlier this, I guess I can say this month, but in June, last month, our
County surveyors.
county surveyor, there we go, sorry. Our county surveyor hosted a region-wide meeting with the surveyors over in your facility, and it was a great experience for all of them. They were very impressed with the facility, the surveying display that's there as well. So, thanks for hosting that.
In our next newsletter coming out, part of this legacy grant will be a survey, if anybody would like to take it, about whether you're a researcher or a community member. So it's just if you would like to do it, so.
Is
maybe
that
help
gonna be
us.
mailed out along with your
Pardon?
newsletter? Mailed out with your newsletter, or?
It'll be mailed with the newsletter, yeah.
Okay. Sounds
So
good.
that'll be coming out in a week or two, so.
What am I gonna do with all my books that I've been saving?
So if you have any questions, we'd be happy to try and answer them.
Do you have plans to do the book sale again in the future after
No,
other?
it's done.
It's just not feasible.
Pardon?
It's not feasible to do it anymore?
It's just, well, it takes up the whole basement.
Yeah.
And we just, there's a lot of sad people that we aren't going to continue it, but we did it for 24 years, and you can't believe the hours it takes. This year was the best one we ever had, because we received a library of a life member, and his library was extensive in local Minnesota area history. So we had, I think, over a $10,000 book sale this year. But when you consider the hundreds of hours, it, and all the room it takes, so
Right.
Okay.
it just seemed like,
Well, thank you for doing it all these years, too. I know it's very important.
basically, most of the years it would bring in between 6,000 and 7,000, so it was quite a boon to have this library, so.
Good. Well, thank you very
Okay.
much.
And thank you again, and do come and visit when you can.
Thank you.
Moving on, John Beckwith.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm John Beckwith, and I'm with the Hiawatha Valley Resource Conservation Development Council. I'm their executive director. My name might look a little familiar to you. I did work down here in Caledonia and Houston County in the 80s, and spent a little time with Russ Craig and a number 2 spade on Commissioner Arnold's farm and looking at alfalfa and plots and so on.
I thought I recognized the name.
Yeah. So I worked with Nestor Chaglow and Irvin Barth and Sailor Wheaton back at that time in the Soil Conservation Service office. So I have fond memories. So coming down here is really a privilege and brings back those memories to me. So I'm glad to be here. Just a little bit about me. I was with Soil Conservation Service, and I worked here in Caledonia in the 80s. And from here, my family and I moved to Eau Claire, Wisconsin, out to Utah, and to Lincoln, Nebraska, where I worked in 7 states in the Northern Plains region, and then ended up finishing my career here in 2011 in the state office of the Natural Resource Conservation Service. Through that time, I worked in a number of different roles with the Resource Conservation Development, or RC&D program. And so when I retired, I was fortunate enough that the Minnesota Association of RC&D Councils, as well as Hiawatha Valley RC&D, hired me on as an executive director. That was a time when they lost federal funding for the program, and so they wanted to keep going and find new ways to do business, and so we've been striving to do that ever since. And I think the most recent folks from Houston County on our RC&D council or board of directors were Glenn Kinneberg and Roger Stenhoff have both been on it since I've been working with them. In the last couple of years, Houston County hasn't participated, so the bottom line of why I'm here is to kind of update you on what we're doing and encourage you. We'd welcome you back onto our leadership board, and if you feel inclined, well, we'd love to have you back. So if you appoint somebody, we'd like that. Otherwise, we keep working, and we keep working in Houston County as well as others because we are regional in the 11 county area. Just a little bit of history. Some of you probably aren't familiar with the RC&D program, but the RC&D program really likes to be at a place where economic improvement and environmental improvement can kind of come together. How can we do market-based conservation? How can we make it make sense economically to do the good things? And certainly Houston County, and my whole career and all the places I've been, the real privilege from someone in my profession of having worked in this county is the people that I worked with, the ones I mentioned, and the farmers. I mean, you turn off the freeway and start on 76, and you just feel a difference in the stewardship for the land. And so you've always had that commitment and leadership. And so I know I'm preaching to the choir in many ways here for the things I'm talking about. But what I would say is that same leadership and the ideas that you have down here, we would certainly welcome them back on our leadership team. A lot of the things we did in the early years and even up till now, a lot of it was forest related to start with. We did a lot with special forest products, timber establishment, woodland protection. We did a sawmill operations study and education tours. We were part of developing a small woodland manager's handbook. Down here in Houston County, we had a Houston County Timber Bridge project that we worked with, and forest utilization processing. So that's always been an area where, if you make economic sense out of it, people will manage their forests better and do a better job with that resource. And so we've always been involved in that. Shortly after, or about the same time, early on, we also looked at hayland and forage issues, and we did a number of demonstrations and supported them. Some of the old hay marketing assistance stuff that we did even in the 80s. And so we have done over the years a number of hayland, Southeast Minnesota Grazing School, so a lot of that type of work, just to give you an example of some of the things that we do. And of course we also got involved in water quality stuff. In Houston County here we did have household hazardous waste stuff. Back in the 80s we did have RC&D support for some of the things where I think there were 13 different departments that were working together on a lot of different water quality issues, from the county health and earth to environmental sciences and county engineer. There was a lot of us working together on some really nice projects at that time. And then some other issues that we've worked here in Houston County on are more community related. A couple of different times we helped with Caledonia Deer Park project, a wood pelleting facility or study, Caledonia Park project, Houston County Airport. Different times along the way we've had projects that affect those sort of things. So that's the type of work that we've done in the past, and still continue to look for opportunities in those same areas. As I look at our current work plan, and we really are trying to focus, we're a small staff, I'm part-time and I'm it. So we continue to, with the board of directors, try to build the program and hire, and we did hire on another person at one point because of projects, but it's project driven. We're not government funded other than the $300 we ask from our sponsors such as yourself. So some of the things we're currently working on is the council has taken a somewhat of an interest in biochar and how that might how we might benefit from biochar, and both from carbon capture standpoint, an agricultural standpoint, and educational standpoint, in that biochar, you know, you think of carbon and the issues of today's world, you don't think of this carbon, which is most of it, but you think of, you know, pencil lead and something that looks like that. So biochar looks like that. So we think with that and the visual and putting it in the soil, there's a good educational opportunity there to talk about carbon and atmospheric change and also improve soil health. Along that same line, we're still discovering ways to work with folks both with grants, but also there's a group, IW Recycling. It's three young folk that just started a new business, and we're looking at a partnership. So this would be a for-profit, non-profit partnership. We see some opportunities. They have a product that they want to develop that deals with biochar. We might be able to use their facilities to do some of the educational piece that I'm talking about. Their piece, on the other hand, will use a product that's a byproduct of the oil press industry, vegetable oil press. And so it's a product that's kind of a hazard to deal with right now, and it's not easy to dispose of. Well, they have a way of utilizing that product as a biochar, come up with a value-added product from that, plus do the educational piece. So that's the kind of thing that, you know, it's kind of exciting to get in, and I don't know where it'll go, but it's fun to be there. And so just as a side note, all of this development kind of happens because I do it. I mean, coming down here today at the same time, I'll charge enough hours to cover my mileage, and then we'll do it. So that helps the business work also. We're also looking at, and we were working with Southeast Water Board, and of course, you know, that's disbanding the now basically. But there's been a long need addressed, or trying to address a need for public affairs assistance in the water quality world. And that's another area that we're working with different people on, trying to come up with that, because it doesn't matter if you're Root River or Zombro or Cannon, or a lot of the issues are the same. Those lines, whether they're county lines or watershed lines, a lot of those common messages are there. And so might we benefit from a larger approach, but still dealing with the Southeast Minnesota issues. And so we're doing that. I do participate, particularly in the Root River and Cedar River One Watershed, One project plan. I'm looking for opportunities primarily there. Another reason I'm down here today is we've been doing a lot with grazing and trying to control invasive species. This is an area where we have seen, and we've seen business startups as a result of some of this, or at least from the benefit of some of what we're doing. The result is from their hard work, but using critters to manage some of the buckthorn and some of the other invasives that we have. And so there's a place where there's business startups of these grazing, diversified landscapes down in Freeburg, I think. Kyle Johnson, I believe. I'm meeting him for lunch and talk about how we might do some things, or some potential grants on doing that on a larger scale than a farm by farm, maybe on a watershed scale. So another example of a type of project that we're working on. And we've done quite a bit with this grazing for the purpose of environmental services over the past 6 years or so. Another area of interest that we have is natural channel restoration, and throughout southeast Minnesota, well, throughout Minnesota, there's a lot of interest now in natural channel restoration. And so we're talking, there was in northern Minnesota a workshop a year ago that was put on by Laurentian RC&D, and we're investigating whether or not that might be beneficial to the folks down here in southeast Minnesota. I guess I'll just leave it at that as an example of what we've done in the past and the types of things we're currently working on. And again, you or Soil and Water Conservation District, either one, both, would be welcome to sit on our leadership board, our board of directors. We just ask, you know, that you assign somebody. Of course, we'll take your $300 as well. That's not from both of you, it's just from one or the other of you. And you know, the key thing for us is the benefit we get from folks like you and both leadership and the ideas that you bring. So with that, I guess I'd answer any questions you have and encourage you to consider joining up with us
Where is
again.
your office out of, or your contact information or anything like that?
Okay, so I work out of my home, which is kind of a cost savings deal also. So I came over here actually from Janesville, Minnesota. My wife and I have a farm over there now. We rent the cropland out, but we do choose and cut Christmas tree. So if you want to come cut a Christmas tree, you're welcome to do that too. But I can certainly get you my contact information.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you a 501c3 then?
We are, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we have been, and we've actually been in southeast Minnesota here since 1979, and 501c3 is about that same length, not quite right away. Yes.
So do you have any brochures or anything to give us, or?
I have with me just, and I could leave these for you. I have a copy of our current plan and some of these historical items that we've been working on. But
Okay.
perhaps as far as a brochure, I could share that with Jeff, and he could provide
That'd
it
be
to you
fine.
at
Yep.
a future
That'd be
meeting.
fine.
That'd be
Yeah,
good.
that would be more informational, perhaps. So, sorry, I wasn't. Should have had that.
Okay.
Thank you. And you get any
Thank you.
information to Jeff, and he'll share it with the
Okay,
rest
thank you
of the
very
board.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Maybe you want to be on that board. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. This is our routine business items. I think we all read through them in our packet. With the addition of that gambling permit, I think was the only thing added to it for Sheldon Valley Sportsmen's Association. Do I need a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Okay, I'll second that.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, moving on to our action items here. Number one, consider approval of the 2019 budget amendments. Carol, you want to do any presentation on that? I know you did forward it to us, but you might be able to explain it a little more.
Just if you had questions, we typically adjust when we get closer to amounts that we know we're actually going to spend. The first budget amendment has to do, though, with using the county recorder's equipment fund to pay for purchases that are made, allowable purchases that are made through the recorder's office for their equipment and some training and travel. We typically did it just at the end of the year, but this just lets Sue know more where things are going, being new and understanding more how our budget works. I'm trying to think, what's the second one? The second one is actually the Road and Bridge, the actual document that they submitted to me for approval. We had looked at the $170,000, but it's actually a little different than that. The expenditures are decreasing by, is it?
50.
No, the revenues are decreasing by 50 and the expenditures by 69, so there's a net gain on that. Just keeping in mind that all of these budget amendments, if they're under, help because we are at a budget deficit that was adopted last year. Then the next amendment has to do with tests in the new NeoGov software for recruitment. And it's just transferring money from one line item or two line items into that to cover that cost that you approved. And the last pages are all adjustments to salaries and benefit lines, and this actually has to do with changes in personnel. I guess one example that I gave Teresa this morning when she asked was in the assessor's office. We didn't know when Carl was going to be leaving. We budgeted out through October. Now we pulled that back since he retired in June. So that's a savings in that department. We've had new employees who start, we always budget for worst case scenario that they take the highest plan, and we had some couple who didn't take insurance at all. So, just to get those in better order too when we're budgeting for beginning our 2020 budget. And I just wanted to have these done so that I could update those when we send out the reports, the spreadsheets for the departments at the end of the week. Mhm. Any questions on any of the other, or any of the?
I actually stopped by
items?
to have it explained because she's very black and white at explaining where we're standing. If you have any questions, so appreciate that.
Not very colorful at all.
So,
And always just, drop me an email or give me a call or stop in if you have any questions on any of the line items. And after this month, I think I pretty much have all the entries. I'm checking on a couple to send it out. You will actually get the line item budgets for each of the departments to be able to see where they're at and where they're at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you very much, Carol. And now we need a motion to approve the budget amendments.
So moved.
Second?
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next must be Brian, engineer. Brian? Consider approval of final contract expense for Generation X Construction LLC. And those again were in our packet.
Yeah, so I'm recommending approval to pay the final payment and close out project SAP 028-599-088. This is a bridge replacement on Fort Ridgely Road. Contractor was Generation X. The original contract was $137,098.50. Work certified for the final payment, $144,328.90. Overruns essentially came from two aspects. There was a little bit of extra riprap that was added, actually quite a bit of extra riprap that was added to help protect some areas from erosion. And then there's some concrete work that was needed. When they went to do the culvert or box line, that box culvert that's put in has dual purpose. It has purpose for drainage and then also cattle pass. The cattle uses that. The upstream end of that structure had some utility lines in the way that we couldn't flatten out the slope leaving that, so we did some concrete work to help get the cattle through and out of the structure without causing some major increase in expenses to relocate the utilities. So that's kind of the overrun items. Nothing that's major in overrun cost. About $7,000 for that extra work. So overall, the project turned out really good, and we're ready to close this out.
Any questions on that project?
I make a motion, we approve the final contract expenses.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in or further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed.
You want me to stay up here for this next one too?
Sure.
Next on is considering approving the 6,000 change order to seal coat the entrance to Wildcat Park.
Yeah. A little while ago, the Parks Committee met and talked about, the current status of Wildcat Park and Bodger Park and different parks here in the county. Wildcat Park, the entrance road pavement is in really rough condition. There's been no work on that entrance road for quite some time. Kind of looked at, what is the best avenue the county can look going forward to extend the life of the pavement before you get into a major cost to go and rip up the existing pavement and to repave it. We have our seal coating contract is going to be seal coating on County 27 from Spring Grove down to Eitzen. They're working in that area this week. Then they'll be moving over onto County 3, going from Caledonia over to Brownsville. When they're in the Brownsville area, it makes sense that if the county is willing to spend about $6,000 on the park, we can get that park surface sealed. Put this chip seal on that as well. It's not going to make that road perfect. It has a lot of alligator crack pavement out there. It's in poor condition, but it is going to help glue it together, extend the life a little bit longer. So I think it's worth expensive doing it. Contractors in the area estimated cost, we're saying $6,000. I'm hoping it comes in less than that. We just don't know how much oil is going to get sucked up by the existing pavement. It's old pavement. It's really dry. It's really cracked up, so it's going to take extra oil. So that's why we're estimating $6,000 on that work.
And they're already in the area, right?
They're in the area, yep.
It's just a single
Yeah.
application. Single.
Yep, a single chip seal with fog seal as well. Fog seal is once put on the oil, you put the chips on top, and then you spray with another light coat of oil. Kind of gets that little bit of extra oil in there to help extend the life too.
It's essentially just a lane to go in. I'm wondering, what about access and egress during the time?
Yeah, so the pavement coming in, it's about 20 feet wide. So they can...
So you could do half and half?
Yes. Yeah, so access getting in and out won't be a problem.
Shouldn't take long.
No, I mean, I figure 3.5 or 2.5 days, they can get about 10 miles in. So, out there, it's only a third of a mile. I mean, they'll get that done within, a couple hours. It's more of the wait for the oil to cure before they can get everything swept up and stuff. So.
Okay.
Well, it needs to be done.
So I'm looking for a motion to approve.
So moved. I make a motion, we approve the change order for Wildcat.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. And before you leave, Brian, I'm going to bring up, I met with Brian, I met with the two of the supervisors for La Crescent Township to look at our salt and sand shed, which is decaying very badly. It's a wooden structure, and the roof could cave in any time, and the township themselves wants at the same time add 2 bays for some of their equipment to get it out of the elements instead of sitting out behind the shed. After a lot of discussion, we decided we have a lot of minutes over since 1964, but nothing really in writing. It's been a verbal agreement between the township and the county, where our shop is, 50-50 for cost-wise. And we talked to them about, and they want to work real closely with us to resolve all this and put it in writing. So Brian is going to contact the county attorney to have something formally written up, so when supervisors and commissioners are gone, we have something in writing. Second of all, we are going to get surveyed so that we use our county surveyor to find the existing boundaries so that we put the new shed up, if we go with that route, within the area that we can work on. And was there something else we were going to?
Yeah, and then the third aspect of that is that the reason why this all got initiated is because the existing sand/gravel salt shed is in poor condition. It's failing. We've shared that building with the township for decades, and it's in pretty severe need of repair at this point. The township came to the county saying, we need to get we want to do some improvements on the township side, but also there's some improvements that should be made on aspects that have been split 50-50 in the past. So we want to formalize some agreements saying kind of, who has what responsibilities and rights out there, and then when this new building gets built, splitting the costs. So the third aspect, besides for having the county surveyor surveying the boundary, would be to go out and try to get some cost estimates put together of what it would cost to replace the existing sand sheds. So I figured I'd work on that here tomorrow. There's no cost at this point to go do some research on what that cost will be for us, and then we'll need to split the cost somehow. Looking at historical records, almost everything out there has been split 50-50 between the county and the township, because we do share it pretty much 50-50. The township wants to have additional building space, whether it's just a covered portion of the the sand building, that they can get their stuff undercover, or if it's an addition onto their shop, they will have some additional work or additional cost above and beyond the county's cost. But we kind of want to start this planning process. We did not budget anything for 2019 for any type of improvements or repairs out there. But it's something we should probably consider budgeting for in 2020, or depending on time frame. There's some pretty major structural concerns with how the condition is of the sand building right now, that there are going to need to be some repairs done before winter. It might make more sense to spend the money using fund balance in 2019 to do the permanent fix rather than patching something together to last for a few months.
So the permanent fix would be
Probably replacing the existing shed. So the current building's about 40 foot by 70 foot. Probably build a new structure that's a little bit bigger. So we need to know where the property line is, because we may want to go 20 to 30 feet deeper than what the current building is. We used to store a bunch of sand outside up in that area. That being part of MS4 regulated area, there's additional stormwater requirements. So we can't just put a pile of sand sitting outside out there without having that pile covered, inspected quarterly, documented, make sure there's no additional runoff causing problems. So having a bigger shed will help not need to refill that shed as often during the winter. What we did this last winter is whenever we had a snow event, we had to come back during that following few days afterwards and refill the shed. So we'd like to get the shed big enough that we don't need to refill after every event. Yes.
Looking like a hoop building?
It's going to depend on how things all line up with, hoop buildings. Ideally, you have them be fairly narrow and long. The wider they go, the more expensive it is. The township wants to have this area to put in a tractor and mower combination, and then their pickup truck. If you go a hoop building to get wide enough that you have the sand for the county, sand for the township, plus additional spot on the side for additional equipment, you divide them up into different bays. It might make more sense to go with a timber structure for that, either wider or keep it narrower, one type or the other, along with an addition onto the back of the shop. So a bunch of cost estimates need to work out. We'll definitely try to get the most cost-effective option. Hoop buildings, they've been working on pretty good for the state. Our county one in Spring Grove has been working on great. So I'd like to see that route go if it'll working on the site. It's a tough site to work with. It's narrow,
right now,
not
this
very
is
deep.
just for your information that to move forward to start the process with the county attorney and the.
Yeah, you don't actually need a motion.
We don't need any motion.
Just
information.
Just
Yeah.
consensus there.
Yep.
All
Still
right.
2 o'clock?
Still 2 o'clock. Yep.
Sounds good. Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Puglisa, consider approval of resolution 1923, approving managed care, and that too was in our packet.
Good morning.
Morning.
So I spoke a little bit with the Public Health and Human Services Committee about this morning. Every 5 years, the state of Minnesota goes through a procurement process for the state healthcare programs. Counties are responsible for determining eligibility for those programs, primarily medical assistance and Minnesota Care. So on a 5-year cycle, they go through a procurement process with different vendors who want to have part of that business. In Houston County, currently we use UCare and Blue Plus. Previously, in the last round of procurement, there were 3 with the inclusion of Medica. About a year and a half into this 5-year cycle, Medica pulled out. So for this year, for this procurement, there's 3 bidders essentially who want to be part of that. The state asks each county to provide some evaluative information to their process of determining which of those companies would be awarded the contracts. We completed that process, and the resolution that they asked for that I return or forward then to Minnesota Department of Human Services, that resolution reflects our recommendation, which is the two current providers we have, UCare and Blue Plus. We did evaluate also Medica's proposal, but given the I guess chaos that ensued when they pulled out about a year and a half into the process, and the fact that they really didn't address that in their new proposal to us, we felt that we couldn't support their proposal. That said, this is information that the state asks us to weigh in on, and how much influence each individual county has in those decisions is not really known. From what I understand from previous procurement processes, the indication is there isn't a lot of influence. But to complete that process, each county has a resolution in front of them based on our recommendations to use a board for those companies bidding on the Minnesota care and medical assistance work in our county. Any questions?
We need a motion to approve the resolution 1923 for managed care.
John explained this as thoroughly as could be, I guess, at our committee, and it's really, I don't want to call it a formality, but I mean, we need to give our opinion, and essentially that's what this is covering. So
the procurement process, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The procurement process includes this county's or each county's input into the process, and so the resolution represents our input into that. Sorry, I interrupted.
So I would move to approve the resolution.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, thank you.
Jeff. Okay, as we move on to number 6, I actually would like to bring up that I conferred with our county attorney, and I requested it to be put on the agenda for consideration of removing Brian Van Gorp from the Board of Adjustment. I think we'll do with a motion and a second, and then we'll open it up for discussion before we take a vote. So at this time, I'd like to make a motion to remove Brian Van Gorp from the Board of Adjustment because of his inability to remain neutral as appropriate.
And I'll second that.
We'll now open up for discussion.
In this situation here, the public is watching us. They're paying close attention. And when people, citizens of this county, go before a Board of Adjustment hearing and pay $500, they expect to get a fair and impartial hearing. And it's obvious in this recent case that did not happen. Now, from my understanding from Jack and Fred, that when Mr. Van Gorp was interviewed for this position, he was asked specifically if he could recuse himself in certain situations where there'd be a conflict, and he said he would. And in this case, he did not do that, so that sentiment was not sincere, obviously. So that's why I feel that he should no longer serve at the pleasure of the board. It's all about fundamental fairness. And he was asked to recuse himself, and he refused. And therefore, this is just going to happen again, I'm afraid.
Further discussion?
I go to all the Board of Adjustment meetings. And at those meetings, I listen to what everybody has to say. I know that Mr. Van Gorp studies the issues and is direct with his questions pertaining to the ordinances, and it's pretty rigid, I guess, as far as following the ordinances. I don't know personal histories in the past, but there were multiple people asked to recuse themselves in the Schutz Quarry situation. He does have a history with regard to the frac sand mining issues from the past. When I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission as a non-count board member. But all the Board of Adjustment meetings that I've been to, from my perspective, he's been fair and asking questions that I agreed with as far as dealing with the ordinances and whatnot. Personal issues aside, from my perspective, he's done a pretty good job as far as the Board of Adjustment. We need independent people on the board that don't necessarily agree with everybody else, but follow what they think is right on the ordinances and the decision-making process. Because the Board of Adjustment, yes, they serve under the pleasure of, the members serve under the pleasure of the county board, but their decisions are not, the county board does not address their decisions.
They're final.
They're final.
Yep.
So, other than the issues that he may have with the mining aspect of it, he's done a pretty good job from my perspective on the county board, or on the Board of Adjustment, not the county board.
I'll try to speak to the reclusion issue as it came down from the judge's opinion. The judge basically, what I've heard from a couple of attorneys anyway, and I'll try to phrase this correctly, the judge felt that there was enough of a history there between Mr. Van Gorp and the mining company that he probably really couldn't be totally fair in his judgment at that point. However, if you look at the way the vote went, Mr. Van Gorp, in that particular instance, voted with the staff analysis recommendation, along with 3 other people on that Board of Adjustment. There was one Board of Adjustment member that voted against the staff analysis in that case, and that was not Mr. Van Gorp. So it was a 4-1 decision, and Mr. Van Gorp was in the majority. So the fact that he didn't recluse himself, I understand, and I think Mr. Van Gorp understands also, that it wasn't necessarily could he divorce himself from the conflict with the operator. It was more the appearance, the perception that because of past history he wouldn't be able to. And perception is important. Appearance is important. And I think that that's kind of where the problem is at this point. I'll quit talking and let somebody else pick it up.
Well, I agree with you, Fred. Perception is important because when we were at our meeting in Mankato, 2 of the lawyers expressed how important it is for the perception part of it, and that you should recuse yourself and even step off the platform, the board chair, table, and go sit in the audience. And so, like I said, he was asked to recuse himself. He refused to. He even went as far as calling him a derogatory name, the applicant, which is unprofessional and uncalled for, and anybody can watch that on the film of that meeting. And so I think Houston County can do better. There's plenty of citizens that would be willing to serve on that and be impartial. Mr. Van Gorp has a long history of his activism and his agenda. And like I said, the people are watching, the people are paying attention to this. And they expect to get a fair and impartial hearing. Now, I know there's an attempt here to kind of just overlook this little thing, but this is not a little thing. Even though it was a 4-1 vote, the judge said we have to go back and remand this without him present. Now, she could have said, it doesn't matter, but she didn't. She pointed it out. And it's our obligation to do this, to act on this and correct this. And this is not a personal vendetta on my behalf. I'm looking out for the county and its liability. That is what I'm concerned about.
Do you have anything you want to say before we call for the vote?
Yeah, I'd like to say one more thing. Mr. Locker has expressed to me a very real concern that we should not make a change in the Board of Adjustment at this point in time when this particular issue is in front of that board. He has 3 or 4 reasons for that, and I'm not going to try to speak to that. He isn't here right now, so I'm not going to try to put words in his mouth.
Fred, which particular issue are you referencing? The
Schutz Quarry.
Okay.
The Schutz Quarry was due to be heard again at the end of July. The operator has requested an extension, and the last time I talked to Aaron, he did not have a timeline on that. I talked with Jeff this morning, and he was hopeful of August, but that was the best I could do.
We have not set a date yet.
And I will move that we table this issue.
Well, we already have a motion. We have a motion on the table.
There's a motion on the table, okay.
And it
Yeah.
doesn't,
I would like to see the issue tabled until after the Schutz Quarry thing is done. That's what I would like to see happen, just from the standpoint of the administrator of that department. Really would like to see that, and I agree with him.
but it wouldn't matter because Mr. Van Gorp is not to be at that
Yeah.
remand hearing, so
Yeah.
it wouldn't matter.
Did
The
Jackie want to say
issue,
anything?
however, is the replacement. The timeline of the replacement, the potential of who might apply to be on that Board of Adjustment, the depth of the pool, whatever. The thought is that we would get a much more possibly get a much more representative sample of people if this particular issue were behind us, rather than having to have a new person come in and sit there on the rehash of that situation. That's the logic.
The one advantage to that would be that this is the first time they would hear it, so they would have a very objective view of that. Whereas the others all went through it before, so But I think we're getting in the weeds here.
Yep, we need to.
Well, I would just weigh in briefly. Well, Tess has left, but Fred was there. Well, when we made this selection, made an attempt to make it clear to Mr. Van Gorp at the time that past history needed to be, not that you can't erase it, but needed to be shelved going forward. Again, probably not the best judgment in that vote. However, I do have to mention that after the meeting, Eric, you were with the Krukow son and lawyer and lit into me about, well, you got your man. So it's difficult for me to feel that you don't have some personal bias in the whole situation. You didn't like him that night.
Yeah, that we can't bring in the personal.
Well, it's
yeah,
relevant.
I'm glad you brought that up, Jack, because you encouraged me to run for commissioner if I thought I could do better. And I'm glad you encouraged me to do that. Because I did run for commissioner.
Right.
Okay, I think at this point we should.
Can I say one last thing?
Yes.
Only from the perspective of Mr. Van Gorp, from my perspective, because he follows the ordinance, he is doing a good job in representing the people of Houston County. Because he follows the ordinances, he studies the issues, and he has intelligent questions that he asks. Should he have recused himself from the Schutz Quarry? Probably so. But overall, on his decision-making with regard to other issues that have been before the board, I think he's done a decent job in representing the people of Houston County by his actions on that board. All I got to say.
And I would just say one more thing, and that's similar to the battles that the country's had over Supreme Court nominees. I don't think Houston County needs to have a litmus test on appointment to these boards. When we appoint to the Planning Commission, do we say, well, you're a farmer, can you forget that you're a farmer? I mean, everybody's got opinions and everybody's got backgrounds. So we have to look at, do they follow the ordinances? Do they do their homework? Do they visit the sites? Do they do what they're supposed to do? And do they make an effort to do it under the rules and laws that we operate under? And I guess if one does that, that's what we should expect.
So we're going to just ignore what was decided here recently?
No, we're not. We're taking we got a motion on the floor and a second. Bob?
My only request would be that we vote by roll.
Okay. We'll call for a roll call vote by district.
Okay, you ready?
Yes.
Would you reread the motion?
To remove Brian Van Gorp from the Board of Adjustment because of his lack of ability to remain neutral as appropriate.
All right. District 1?
No.
District 2?
Aye. That's a
District-
yes.
District 3?
No.
District 4?
Yes.
District 5?
No.
Okay. Motion stands.
3-2, no.
All right, you're still in the Board of Adjustment, Mr. Van Gorp. Moving on to discussion items, administrator updates.
Just a couple things. Continued update on our enterprise lease fleet. We have received our 2 patrol vehicles. So they are, you may have seen them briefly in the parking lot. They've gone to get striped and
Actually, I pulled into Quick Trip in La Crescent to get gas, and getting gas was our chief deputy. And I said, I hope that you're paying for it, not the county, in a joking manner. He said, well, you like our new vehicle. And they're very, very happy with it.
All right.
Another deputy was with him, and he said, much better than what they had previously. So, and hopefully, going forward, they'll all say that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're still working on getting those 2 vehicles to our outfitters to get all the
That's what they're doing.
countermeasures and stuff put on them. No delivery date yet on the other 3 that we have coming, but I have a meeting this afternoon with Enterprise to address the out years of the program as we kind of readjust what our programming looks like for our future acquisitions. So working on that this afternoon. And just flip through my notes real quick. Last night we met with the city. The city had their public hearing to address our amendment to our conditional use permit for the parking associated with our community center on the highway. And the committee approved 4-1 to, in principle, for our conditional use permit amendment. Technically their motion was to approve what we were asking for, but to have the verbiage of the new conditional use permit brought back to the next meeting for final approval. So their city clerk and attorney are working on drafting what that'll look like. Came down a little bit of the, they wanted to see an approved lease before they agreed. We wanted to see an agreement before we went forward with the approved lease. So now that we have their approval, I will work with the landowner's attorney and our attorney to finalize the lease agreement to make all of that possible. We'll give a copy of that to the city. We'll work with them on the language of their conditional use permit. But essentially, they approved authorizing us to also use leased space or owned space to meet the parking requirements.
Good.
With some concern over a 10-year lease versus a longer lease and whether or not the county would pay our bills.
I was impressed with that.
What's that?
I was impressed with that, questioning whether or not the county would pay their bills.
Yeah.
How do we know the county's gonna make their lease payments and stay current on their lease?
Well, you volunteered that, didn't you?
That's a different piece of property. Suppose I could.
Let's see, we've got a meeting on the 11th with La Crescent to address some of their concerns over the Elm Street Highway 29 project. So we'll be meeting with them to address those. We've talked about that previously at some meetings, so no update there yet. And we'll be scheduling a Wildcat meeting as well here with our management down there to just kind of see how things are going through the season here as we go forward. So
We had the 4th of July, that's a big piece.
Yeah.
Updates on that?
So
That's good.
that's
So
what I
that-
have
I'm
at this
sorry,
time,
La
unless you have any
Crescent's,
questions.
I think
10 o'clock.
So 10 o'clock on Thursday.
Thursday.
Yeah, okay.
Anything
That's
else?
what I have.
Okay,
Unless you have any
Brad, do you
questions
have
for me.
anything else to report?
No, I haven't had meetings since the last board meeting. I had one, but I forgot it. I missed it. I blew it.
Bob, do you have anything other than the city meeting?
No, I think Jeff gave us the information on the city meeting, so that's squared away.
Good.
I did talk to him after the fact with regard to the airport. There's some conversation about having a lease or not a lease, but a courtesy vehicle available at the airport for people that use it. We don't do that because of the cost of insurance and the cost that it has. The city really isn't interested in paying the insurance because the question is, you don't know what people are gonna use the car for. Are they coming to Caledonia? Are they going to La Crosse? What's the purpose? So they're not overly interested in that either.
Okay. Eric, do you have anything?
Nope, I haven't had any meetings.
Jack?
Yes, the meeting, I had Hiawatha Valley Mental Health, probably the most important thing for our county is the fact that they are continuing to work with Mr. Snodgrass on designing a new location for their offices, and if things follow the plan, they're looking at December before everything would be completed to the satisfaction of both parties. So I think that's good news moving forward, keeping them in the community and in a proper place.
Sounds good. I already gave my update on my 2 meetings with the Crescent Township last evening. Cindy brought up this morning that the training for Board of Equalization certification is on the website now, so if anybody wants to get on there and get there before next June, it's available. And the township meeting.
Whose website that on?
It's on the, I have to stop.
It's the assessor's website, isn't there?
It is a-
State assessor.
I'll have Cindy send
organization?
out the information again to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't remember, and I did take it, but it's been a couple years already. And I think that's all I had too. On the reminders, Jeff, I just want to tell you, August 27th is our regular board meeting.
Okay.
And have we moved forward on any of the ordinance changes as far as the variance hearings that we brought up at workshop? About a 10-year limit before the,
No.
okay.
I've talked to Aaron about
Talked
that.
about it a little bit.
Did you?
Yeah. And it's not just easy to make the changes,
Okay.
to come up with a means of maintaining what we have and grandfathering, so to speak, the old ones.
Without them going through another
Without-
hearing?
Without going through the entire process. There should still be a process, but
Okay.
not the full process. So it's
as a board, we
discussed.
couldn't set a policy for that?
We could set a policy. But it's kind of a question of where do you go? How far do you go and what do you cover?
I think we should work with our attorney and Aaron and write up something, get something going.
Yeah, we'll work on it.
Okay. Our administrator will take care of that. But that's all I have. Is there any closing public comment? I'm gonna get it now.
Morning, Commissioners. Yvonne Krogstad from Spring Grove, Caledonia Township. I have been battling chickweed and wild cucumber in my lawn and gardens. And it reminded me of a county control problem. And I don't remember who brought this to the board, but it addressed the Japanese hops along the river. I was wondering if that program had been completed, the results of it, what's happening with that.
That's what's coming up here. Amelia's finalizing that program.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it hasn't been done yet. The
Okay.
job hasn't been done yet.
Okay. Who
It was
did bring
supposed to
that?
be- It was supposed to be
It's a-
on this
it's a
morning's
contract.
agenda,
Yeah,
but
but-
there are some details with a contract that haven't been finished yet, and so it'll have to come in 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
But we
And-
haven't forgotten about it, we're still at it.
Okay. Do any of you know what to do about chickweed and wild cucumber?
Wild cucumber, you pull it down and tear it up.
Well, the gentleman that spoke to us was talking about essentially having herds of goats do this, but
Yeah.
they don't pull the roots out when they eat, do they? I mean,
Probably not, but if you leave them there, well, they'll keep it eaten down.
if you keep them there, but
Well, yeah.
otherwise it's just a temporary, isn't it?
Right.
I would think.
Well,
Okay,
That's what
You're
it's
not
for.
eradicating
preventative
weed,
for
you're
the
feeding
spread.
goats.
okay.
Say what?
I did a story about that last year.
They will eliminate it?
Guy rehabilitated some goat prairies. Right over, well, it's in Houston County.
Okay.
They brought in a herd of goats, destroyed
Everything.
Well, no, the invasive.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Well,
Anything
I would make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?